Hey everybody, Bearded Rogue here, and I'm really excited because today was finally the day, well, yesterday was finally the day, when the Mae Young Classic, something I've been waiting for a little over a year, finally hit the WWE Network. I've been waiting for it since they announced that they were looking into doing it just after the Cruiserweight Classic last year. I loved the Cruiserweight Classic. It's still, to me, or to my mind, one of the best things that the WWE Network has ever had. One of the best things WWE itself has ever done. The matches were super exciting. The talent was amazing. They went outside of their comfort zone and found people who weren't going to sign to long-term contracts. They made it all about the wrestling. They still managed to build storylines and put on some of the most phenomenal matches I've ever seen. So, as a fan of women's wrestling, I was pretty excited that they were going to be showcasing women's wrestling in a tournament that was similar to the Cruiserweight Classic with the Mae Young Classic. It wasn't originally given a name until earlier this year, around the time that they did the UK tournament for the UK champion, which was also excellent. If WWE wanted to just be tournaments like this, I would watch those all day long, every day, all the time, because they really put everything they have into it, and it's not broken up by stupid Vince McMahon booking decisions or ridiculous backstage segments or interrupted every 5 minutes by advertisements for Kentucky Fried Chicken and other nonsense. The tournament format is phenomenal. I love it. The Cruiserweight Classic, as I said, was stupendous. The UK tournament was amazing. I had all the highest hopes walking into this one, particularly once they started announcing the names of who was going to be in the tournament. It's kind of like a who's who of women's wrestling around the world. There are some names that they didn't get. For example, Kairi Hojo, now Kairi Sane in the tournament, was the only one of the Stardom 3 that they brought in. The other two did not sign. They were pursued, I guess, but either chose not to or WWE went in a different direction. I don't know exactly. There's a lot more Americans in this tournament than in the Cruiserweight Classic, where they emphasized the internationality. Not to say that they didn't have internationality in the Mae Young Classic. The first ever woman from the subcontinent of India to compete in a WWE ring is in this tournament. They have people from Brazil, Japan, China, Germany, Scotland, trying to think where else, New Zealand, I think I may have said that already, Australia, Mexico, like a little bit from all over the place. They tried to keep the international flair. It's not quite as international as the Cruiserweight Classic was. Unfortunately, one of the competitors who was supposed to be in it that I was very looking forward to seeing, Nixon Newell, hurt her knee and had to be replaced by an alternate. Which is unfortunate. It would have been nice to see Wales and the woman with the shiniest wizard in the business competing on the WWE stage, but unfortunately injuries are something that happen in the business. So they released, unlike the Cruiserweight Classic where they released one episode a week and we watched it week after week, they decided to basically release around a week, I believe, is how it's going to go. So they released the first 4 episodes. Each episode has 4 matches in it, with the 32 competitors, 16 matches. It works out math-wise, and every episode is good. There is not a single bad episode amongst all of them. The main events, or I shouldn't really call them main events, the match that occurs last in each episode is phenomenal wrestling. All of the other matches are really, really good. There's not a lot of weak matches. Even in the Cruiserweight Classic, some of the first round matches had some weaker competitors in them. Same thing with the UK tournament. This has a couple of newer competitors in it, but everybody puts on the performance of their life. Like, I think everybody knew what this meant to women's wrestling in the U.S. and what this could mean going forward. We may get a women's WWE product out of this, the same way we got 205 Live out of the cruiserweights. You know, women's wrestling is something that has been present to various degrees in the WWE, but has largely been misused throughout the history of the WWE. It's only recently with NXT and the rise of things like Shimmer and Stardom in Japan that women's wrestling internationally has really started being taken seriously, especially by the WWE. I think they kind of got a wake-up call. Lucha Underground having intergender matches in a lot of the smaller indie feds. Kimberly, now Abby Lath, holding the Chikara Grand Championship, the championship that up to that point had only been held by men, basically their world championship, was another turning point that's occurred recently. Candice LeRae being so big that they invented intergender belts for her and her tag team partner Joey Ryan. The world is changing in professional wrestling for the better. There's no reason that the women who work as hard, if not harder, than the men don't deserve to have the spotlight shined on them, don't deserve to have the same kind of opportunities. They deserve to have stipulation matches. They deserve to be the main event of episodes of television. They deserve to be the main events of pay-per-views. They deserve to have their own pay-per-views. They deserve to have their own show. Like, women wrestling sometimes makes me question why we let men wrestle at all. It really is that good. And the Mae Young Classic so far with round 1 of the tournament has been a showcase of why that's the case. The talent is amazing. Absolutely amazing. Some of them are a little rough around the edges still. Some of them are newer, but there's not a single competitor in this tournament who I wouldn't want to see more of going forward, which is fantastic, because that means that the women who do sign with the WWE and go on to have careers there, and even the women who don't and continue to work on the indie scene or work with Global Force Wrestling or WCPW or Progress or wherever they go. Progress, sorry, British friends. Progress, it's not Progress. No matter where they go, they're going to have a larger spotlight shine on them because of their participation in this tournament. There are several matches where I wanted both competitors to win. Abby Lath faces the alpha female, Jazzy Gabert from Germany. I wanted both competitors to win. I'm not going to spoil results here. You know, I really wanted to see Tessa Blanchard and Kairi Sane both go on. They're both phenomenal athletes. Just the matchups that they put on are amazing, and some of the women who were knocked out in round 1 are people who could have won the tournament based on just skill alone and time in the business and their abilities. I'm absolutely shocked that at some of the people who are no longer in the tournament based on the first round results. As I said, I'm not going to give any spoilers. My picks before watching everything for the top 4, I believe Toni Storm, Mercedes Martinez, Shayna Baszler, and Kairi Sane are going to be the top 4. I would not be surprised to see Shayna Baszler and Kairi Sane in the finals. I don't know what the actual results are yet for anything beyond round 1. I've managed to avoid spoilers. Even though this was taped earlier this summer, I wanted to be surprised as I watched it, the same way I was with the Cruiserweight Classic, and I'm sticking to that. If I had to guess who was going to win, I don't know who I would say is going to win. I really think that probably Shayna Baszler and Kairi Sane will be the top 2 at the end. However, in the Cruiserweight Classic, I really thought Zack Sabre Jr. and Kota Ibushi would be the top 2 in the end. So maybe WWE will pull a swerve and they'll give it to somebody else who needs the win to raise their stock, because Shayna Baszler is already an MMA a noteworthy MMA person. She's one of the 4 horsewomen, Ronda Rousey's group of people that she trains with and that she's friends with. She doesn't need a lot more hype for people to know who she is, the Queen of Spades. Kairi Sane is like one of the preeminent talents in the world. Like, if you see her elbow drop finisher, it's absolute poetry in motion. I have never seen a better elbow drop in the entirety of my existence. The Macho Man had a good elbow drop. Shawn Michaels had a good elbow drop. Kairi Sane makes them both look like they don't know what they're doing when it comes to elbow drops. So it's just amazing, the talent that's being showcased here, and I'm so excited. I hope it leads to more. All of the matches are good. It's not the same as cruiserweights. One of the things I will point out is that the women are working much closer to a standard WWE style. They aren't pulling like crazy moves out of their hat like the cruiserweights did. And I think that's overall a good thing. I think it'll get people used to seeing what the product that WWE has in mind when they think of women's wrestling, and that that way there won't be as much of a gap between what we see in the tournament and what we see eventually in a hopefully women's show. That's what I would really like to see. What I really want to see is intergender matches, but that's never going to happen in the WWE. They're never going to allow the men and the women to compete on the same stage at the same time. I shouldn't say never. Maybe once Vince is gone and Triple H is on his way out and somebody else is looking at taking over, but Triple H is interested in giving women the same opportunities as men, but not on the same stage as men. He isn't a fan of intergender wrestling. I disagree firmly, but that's my prerogative. You know, there are some people who believe that women wrestling the men or defeating the men will somehow lower the men's stock. I know that on the indie scene it hasn't changed much. Instead, it's made people like Candice LeRae and Kimberly Abby Lath famous for competing on the same level as the men, and why shouldn't they be allowed to? You know, you could get into the whole, you know, men compete at different gymnastics events than women, and there's a whole bunch of reasons you can say that they should be separate, and I'm willing to allow them to be separate, but I do like intergender wrestling. I think that it's really good. It's no different than watching Rey Mysterio try to fight the Big Show. If you want to bring it down to a size, you know, men are generally bigger than women. If you want to bring it down to that, Rey Mysterio fought the Big Show, The Undertaker, Kane, and there's no difference there as far as I'm concerned between that matchup being believable and Rey is suddenly a woman instead of him. Same weight, same height, same moveset, but female, and I think the match still works. But I didn't start this to talk about intergender wrestling. The Mae Young Classic is something I've been waiting for a long time. So far, round 1 has lived up to the hype. I'm very, very excited to see more of it. I'm very excited to see more of even the people who lost in the first round. All of them did a fantastic job. WWE highlighted its first full-time female referee, which is a very exciting thing. They've had female referees in the past. They had one in the 80s, but this is the first full-time female referee. I'm excited to see that gender barrier broken down even more as well. I hope that she starts reffing standard matches on other shows, whether it's NXT or 205 Live or Raw or SmackDown. I just hope she's thrown into the mix, just like all of their other referees, because there's no reason she can only be used on special women's-only events. That, to me, is kind of ridiculous. But yeah, it was good to see that exists. Jim Ross and Lita are the commentary team. Lita is a little bit awkward on commentary at times because that's not her primary focus. However, like Daniel Bryan in the Cruiserweight Classic, she brings a lot of knowledge of the competitors and what they're doing and how they're doing it into the conversation that is very, very welcome. So while her cadence isn't as good as good old JR, who's an absolute pro at this stuff, she's very welcome on the commentary team, much better than a lot of the other color commentators that they have. JR, as always, is an amazing play-by-play guy. I could listen to JR call every wrestling federation in the world anytime. He's probably my favorite announcer of all time. He's never been a part of my favorite team of all time. I think my favorite announced team is still Bobby the Brain Heenan and Gorilla Monsoon, although Corey Graves and Tom Phillips down in NXT were pretty darn good. JR has always been phenomenal, even when they paired him with dead weight like The King, or Michael Cole, or any of the others. So it's good to hear him on WWE again. It's good to hear him and Lita together. Both of them very knowledgeable about the business, very respectful of the business, and very solid on the fundamentals of storytelling on the announce desk based on what's going on in the ring. They aren't randomly talking about weird stuff that has nothing to do with the match. They're always talking either about the competitors, the history of the competitors, what's specifically going on in the ring at the time, who they're going to be facing if they win the match, that sort of thing. It's really, really good. The announcing is solid. The production values are, of course, top-notch. Everybody's theme music kind of sounds the same. It's not nearly as distinctive as I would hope, but in the Cruiserweight Classic, like, only a few people even really had theme songs. Everybody else's was kind of instrumental nonsense, which is kind of what's going on here, but it's not too bad. The costume department, like always, knocks it out of the park. WWE production values are just great. It's filmed at Full Sail in front of the same crowd that they film NXT at whenever NXT does its multiple TV tapings. Full Sail is a fantastic audience. I'm so glad that WWE found some place like that because they really add a extra level of excitement to the events. They're really good for NXT. They were great for their Cruiserweight Classic. They're really good for the Mae Young Classic as well. They have a lot more women in the audience. I don't know how intentional that was, or if that was just self-selecting, if more women wanted to see the Mae Young Classic, and so more women showed up. Seeing all of the wrestlers, the women's wrestling legends and current stars show up and support to watch the tournament is really cool. Ronda Rousey and the other 3 horsewomen are there to support Shayna, and that's cool to see. The Rock's family is out there. The Rock's mom is out there to watch the event. They have a whole bunch of people who specifically came out to watch women's wrestling and to support it and show how much this matters. And this tournament really does matter. Women's wrestling is fantastic. I'm glad that they're getting a showcase event of their own. I hope that it leads to more. I would not at all be upset if women's wrestling in the WWE had its own show. If the Cruiserweights can show up on Monday Night Raw and then also have their own show, there's no reason that the women's wrestlers can't show up on the main attractions and then also wrestle on their own show as well. It'd be great to have that kind of a venue. I don't know if that's the plan or exactly what they're going to do. The women's divisions are very, very small right now on both Raw and SmackDown. There's only really like 3 women in title contention on Raw, and that's Sasha Banks, Alexa Bliss, and Nia Jax. Before Alexa Bliss and Charlotte switched places, it was Sasha Banks, Alexa Bliss, and Nia Jax. Before Alexa Bliss switched, it was Charlotte, Sasha, and Nia, with Bayley thrown in there. Now Bayley's injured, so they're really hurting as far as talent goes. They have other people, they just don't use them, namely Emma, Mickie James, and Dana Brooke. The SmackDown side of things has more people who are active, but they don't have nearly as much star power. Charlotte's been out taking care of her dad. Rick, who's been very, very sick, had to be put into a medically induced coma for some surgery. Apparently he's recovering, but she's been away for a while for that. Naomi and and Natalia were feuding over the belt. Natalia won for whatever reason. Carmella's Miss Money in the Bank. She's showing up, you know, periodically. First ever women's Money in the Bank winner. So SmackDown has more of a scene, like Tamina and Lana are there, but they're not really a factor right now. But again, like, there's like a handful of women on either roster, and you know, they're not even a third, probably even less than that, of the talent that's on either show. And so it would be great to see a lot of these competitors be brought in and bulk up the women's division so we have more people involved. For as bad as 205 Live has been treated, and the fact that they shoot it after after SmackDown goes off the air, and the crowds are dead, they've done a really good job of writing storylines that aren't all about the belt. They've done a lot of things that have the people competing with each other, and while WWE historically has only written women as either catty and crazy or uptight and bitchy, the women who are out there right now are doing a decent job of trying to diversify that. There's only so much you can do with the creative staff on hand, but hopefully if they get their own show, that show will get its own creative staff. We'll get people who really understand how to write women's wrestling. People who write this stuff in NXT are doing a fantastic job down in NXT, so it would be great to see them being given a bigger stage as well. It could just lead to all sorts of things, you know. There's definitely a place in the world for women's wrestling. Shimmer and Stardom have proven that. Glow on Netflix being such a big success has proven that people are at least interested in it, even though the original Glow product doesn't really hold a candle to what we can see now in women's wrestling. It did kind of start things to some extent. Women's wrestling predated it, but televised women's wrestling, you know what I mean. Women's wrestling is great. The Mae Young Classic is great so far. I'm excited to see where they go with it. I'm so happy that it's finally made it out, and that everybody's being given a place to showcase their talents, and I really look forward to seeing more of it. It's really good. You should check it out if you have the WWE Network. You can, online, on YouTube, you can actually watch the parade where they introduce everybody, and the bracketology episode, which goes into what the brackets are and the matchups and gives you some background on the competitors. It's really, really good. Those are free if you don't have the network, just to get some more detail about what it is that I'm talking about if you don't know. But Mae Young Classic, solid thumbs up from me. Probably going to get 2 thumbs up as it goes on and we see everything unfold. But I'm really excited and I'm really happy that it's here. And I'll just leave it at that, guys. Go watch it. It's fantastic wrestling. See you later. Bearded Rogue out.